Nar, Moor, Pular, Fubi, Mandinga, Kisi, Kanga, Chamba, Phone, Hausa, Nago, Edo, Calabar, Ibio, Congo, Makwa, Arda, Moko, Dindi, Java, Mina, Ewe, Nupe. According to the Whitney Plantation Museum, these are some of the indigenous African ethnicities of which members were bartered and sold as human cargo from the great and exploited continent known as Africa, as the late Reverend Martin Luther King said in his last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, to the colony of Louisiana. Through sheer terror and violence, European enslavers attempted to strip these indigenous African human beings of their cultural and ethnic heritages, relying on the power to label them Negro, Black, Mulatto, or other socially constructed terms to deny them of their human right to self-determination. The vestiges of descent-based chattel slavery that mar my family's history in the United States traveled consequently with us all the way to California through the Great Migrations, like my father's ancestors who were once enslaved on the Whitney Plantation in Louisiana, formerly known as Habitation Hido. And like my mother's ancestors, namely my grandmother and great-grandmother Catherine Young and Viola Wilson Cooper, who were subjected to slavery by another name, known as sharecropping in Chula, Mississippi. These mighty women were internal refugees trekking from Chula to Los Angeles to escape casteist slavery and other forms of terror in the Deep South, only to be met by Jim Crow again out west. As the esteemed Ta-Nehisi Coates once wrote, "Never forget that we were enslaved in this country longer than we have been free." Chattel slavery, sharecropping, convict leasing, de jure and de facto segregation, redlining, educational funding discrepancies, predatory financial practices, unfair labor practices, chronic unemployment, medical experimentation, intellectual property deprivation, environmental terror, family separation, police brutality, anti-African American hate crimes, vigilante violence, extrajudicial terror, war on drugs, mass incarceration, unfair sentencing, the school-to-prison pipeline, extreme poverty, homelessness, gentrification, wealth disparity. We have been relegated to the bottom of the class system in this country. Black, African American, American freedmen, however you want to call us, we are resiliently surviving.
Amen.
We are resiliently surviving the afterlife of descent-based chattel slavery. In fact, African Americans have been historically burdened with confronting the aforementioned lingering badges and incidents of slavery without significant government aid or private action, particularly since the broken promise of Reconstruction in this country and the
Yes. Sing. Woo! Yes. Yes. Yes.
We have been confronting these baddies and incidents of slavery without significant government aid or private action, particularly since the broken promise of Reconstruction and the unjust dismantling of the Freedmen's Bureau in 1872 that accompanied it. So, as I conclude, it is my hope that the task force's general efforts reinvigorates the Black American community to exercise our human right to self-determination with a renewed spirit and energy that enables us to freely determine our political status and to pursue our economic, social, and cultural development via comprehensive reparatory justice policies.
Yes. Truth.
The California Reparations Task Force will sunset in a couple of days, actually during the International Decade for People of African Descent, which is from 2015 to 2024, which was proclaimed by the UN General Assembly. So it is also my hope that the task force general efforts strengthen the movement for global reparatory justice for people of African descent. Lastly, the task force's final report also highlights the unjust treatment in some instances of many groups in California, from Native, Latinx, Asian, and African Black diasporic communities and other marginalized groups. So it is also my hope that the task force's general efforts empowers these groups in their respective advocacy and ultimately strengthens the capacity for cross-cultural allyship and movement building. It's been an honor and a privilege, and thank you. That concludes my message.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
So now we'll go to Vice Chair Brown, and then we'll go to Member Montgomery Step.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To my esteemed colleagues who have done an unparalleled job of addressing the unfinished business.
Unfinished business.
Of eradicating from the body politic of this state of California. I'm a history buff. For this symbolic statement here of the Sankofa bird, the symbolism representing a bird with an egg in its mouth, looking backwards in order to go forward and have pregnant possibilities for one's future. Quickly, number one, I want to go back as we debate the altness and the rightness of our demanding redress and repair. Many, because they don't read, haven't discovered that the first governor of this state of California was one Peter Hartman
Take your time.
I want to see if you knew it. And in his politics that infected him before he got to California, I must recite for you his trail. Came from Nashville, Tennessee, and led the first wagon train westward in 1843. And that rascal had an established policy that no mulattoes or blacks would be permitted to be in that wagon train. And when he got to the Oregon Territory, he settled a town called Germantown. And again, his official act of business was to be mean as hell to black people. For he established an ordinance that was dubbed, that was named the Peter Burnett flogging law, that stipulated any mulatto or black who's caught in that town would be beaten every 6 months until he or she left town. And that law stayed on the books of what began to be the Oregon Territory and later the state of Oregon until 1926. And that's why we've had so many reactionary, mean-spirited, bigoted folks up in the Idaho and the Oregon states right now. But in 1848, when he heard that gold was down here in California, he led another wagon train and ended up here in the Sacramento area. He was so slick and sleazy that he was able to emerge as the first governor, I repeat, of this state. And in this book that I'm delighted to recommend to you by Nukes, great scholar, it is documented, my friends, that he was the Donald Trump, the troubled businessman of that era. Let me hasten to say, he had to leave office.
For real, say it.
He had to leave office in disgrace because some debt from the Midwest caught up with him. But still, after he left his stain. And he was able to get on the state Supreme Court
Wow.
of the state of California. And there was the major civil rights case of the West involving a 19-year-old lad from my native state of Mississippi, R.C. Lee. R.C. Lee was brought here to Sacramento by Charles Stovall. Came from the biggest slave-holding family of the state of Mississippi in North Mississippi in Carroll County. That man, Peter Burnett, when he sat on that high court and that case of R.C. Lee was heard, when Charles Stovall wanted to take him back to Mississippi as an enslaved person, though California was a free state. But Peter Burnett voted with the minority opinion that R.C. Lee would be sent back to Mississippi as an enslaved person. Thank God that right won. He was set free. But black people were not set free from that mutation of enslavement. For in the state of California, we were subjected to such horror, such hellishness, and such harm that in the city of San Francisco on April the 13th, 1858, over 800 blacks in segments fled from San Francisco up to British Columbia, where they settled. Why am I citing all of this history? So that you will have today, as we conclude, a Sankofa moment of looking back and saying, regardless of what this nonsense is that Mr. DeSantis down in Florida tries to inflict upon us, we're going to look back and we're going to read and we're going to make sure that our descendants will be able to consult this great document and see the evidence that this state has committed the crime against black folks, and it's time for them to pay their crime bill. Don't come to telling us that you don't have the money.
Come on.
Tell it.
Come on.
Tell the truth.
Come on.
Where I come from in Mississippi, they had what you call a layaway plan.
Come on.
Tell it, doctor.
Come on.
Tell it if you can't pay it. Because of deficits don't last always.
Come on.
That's right.
Come on.
That's right. Even when we had a solvent budget, we still were mean to black folks,
Right. That's right.
denying us quality education.
Yeah. Come on.
Cosio was right.
Hallelujah.
We experienced savage inequality in education.
Come on.
So shame on that Supreme Court of the United States of America that is meeting to tell us, even as we meet,
Yes.
that affirmative action should be no more.
That's right. Tell
I
the
say
story.
to you,
Tell the truth.
my teacher friend, Dr. Martin Luther King was right when he said in that class in social philosophy in 1962, if America and California, I would say parenthetically, has done mean, unjust things to the Negro, it must organize and do good things with the Negro
Right.
for the benefit of the Negro. End of the quote. That sounds like reparations.
Yeah. Come on.
That sounds like affirmative action.
Yeah.
We need to stop lying on Dr. King and his dream. When we were talking about justice, and that check that came back bounced. Insufficient funds.
Tell it.
Yeah.
So I bid you adieu today.
Right on.
To say, I thank God that I have my dear wife over here to my left. Jane Evangelist. Who bend the wind beneath my wing.
Right on.
And I commit this day at the age of 82 that I'm going to stay in this struggle. I'm going to stay in the struggle until justice rolls down.
Come on.
Justice.
Like water,
Come on.
and that's an ever-flowing stream. I'm going to stay in this struggle until the day will come that because of the fight of this task force and the integrity of black folks
Right.
who were the only ones to be enslaved in this nation, I'm going to stay in the struggle until America is redeemed.
Come on.
And the day will come when all of us will be able to say, I'm black and I'm proud.
Black.
I'm yellow and I'm not.
Come on.
I'm red and angry. I'm white and all right. I'm a woman. I'm black.
Hallelujah.
Gay. But I'm not. Hey. I'm an immigrant. And I'm injustice. That's what this separation is about. For the good of the matter. God bless you.
God bless you.
Hallelujah. Yes. Hallelujah.
I'm black and I'm proud. I'm black and I'm proud.
Hallelujah.
Black and I'm proud.
Thank you,
Hallelujah.
Vice Chair Brown, for those wonderful remarks. We'll now turn to Member Montgomery Stepp. What do you say after that? Say it loud. This really has been a journey of a lifetime, and I think that in my career and my life, this will be the most impactful thing that I have done in this place. I know that the work is not yet done. I am the daughter of Clifford and Patricia Montgomery, and the granddaughter of Olinda and Leroy, Tanner and Jack, the great-granddaughter of Floyd and Bessie and Tom and Clotilde, and I do what I do for them. My father came to San Diego from Joppa, Texas, by way of the military, and my mother came to San Diego from Mississippi when she was 2 years old. Her family believed that they could experience true freedom in California, but they did not. Sunny California was then and is now riddled with covert laws that masquerade as fair and equal. They are actually racist and harmful. Proposition 209 was one of those. My parents built a construction business from the ground up. Before California voters passed Prop 209, my parents were successfully building generational wealth for my brothers and I. They were well qualified, well prepared, and innovative. As we would say today, they were young, black, and gifted. Unfortunately, their hard work and persistence were no match for the racial undertones that were embedded in Prop 209. Once affirmative action was taken away, so were my parents' dreams and their wealth. This dynamic shift of minority business exclusion in California happened as I prepared for college. Although my parents were not in the financial position they wanted to be in, they insisted that I attend Spelman College anyway. I remember my mom sending me the very last bit of money so that I would not starve. Wow. I worked and went to school full time, and it proved to be too stressful for my body. In the middle of college, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. Now, after going through this reparations journey, I wonder if my parents had been free to use their knowledge and talent to provide adequately for their family, would I have had to suffer so much? My parents experienced direct harm from the racist policies influenced by systemic oppression. And although my life at the time was a byproduct of their struggle, I experienced the racism and struggle here every single day, especially as a woman in the descendant community who is an elected leader in these white spaces. I understand what is at stake here. My life's journey allows me to see reparations as a spiritual reckoning, a calling for truth and justice. And we know that the truth is the only thing that will set us free. We have been on the battlefield fighting against principalities and things that we cannot see in order to force this system to be right by descendants of enslaved people for the generational harm that has been afflicted upon us. We must believe that reparations can come to fruition. We've come such a long way, and this work must not be in vain. So I'm calling for all of us to continue to make the case for a full reparations package. We are not asking for performative justice, but demanding reparations in all categories: satisfaction, restitution, compensation, apology, and guarantee of non-repetition. It is not unreasonable, it is not unattainable, and it is not unjustifiable for this state to address the immense harm done to descendants of enslaved people. Lastly, I will just say there are not enough words to thank the Honorable Dr. Shirley Weber. In getting us here where we are today. And I just want to personally say thank you to her. I also want to thank the DOJ and my fellow, my fellow Congress members for sharing the last 2 years of your life and doing the emotional labor it requires to see the type of outcomes we have today. I truly appreciate you, and I know the individual sacrifices that you all have made. And lastly, I want to thank Chair Moore. Chair Moore, thank you for standing strong. Thank you for your conviction.
Yes.
And thank you for leading with a combination of your heart and your mind.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Member Montgomery Stepp, for that incredibly moving reflections. I'll turn to Senator Bradford for his reflections.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me first thank each and every one of you who made this a priority to be here this morning.
Yes.
Really appreciate all of you here, but most importantly, those who followed this process for the last 2 years, who followed us up and down the state to let your voices be heard. We greatly appreciate it. And should be recognized that we're here because of you. And let me begin also by saying what a great honor it has been to serve on this task force.
Yeah.
And as an individual who's been elected for 25 years, I have no doubt this will be the most impactful public service work and policy I will do in my career. And I want to thank these 8 amazing individuals that I've had to serve with.
Yeah.
Dr. Drills, give her a round of applause. Attorney Holder, our amazing chair, Attorney Moore, Don Tamonte, Attorney Don Tamonte, for your wisdom, your insight, your patience, your comments. Councilwoman Montgomery Stepp, Dr. Devon Scott Lewis, for your brilliant. But last but not least, my North Star, my rock, the sage, wise, not preacher, but teacher, Amos Brown. Give him a round of applause. Many times when we were swinging off course, he always made it real, as you heard in his presentation. And it's factual. It's not something that's, he knows, he's lived it. So thank you, Dr. Brown, for your wisdom, your friendship, your guidance, your tutelage, all that. And we must remind each and every one of us that the final report is not the end of the work. It is really just the beginning. So it requires each and every one of us to stay engaged in this process. We have to. The job of the task force was not to implement anything. It was simply to recommend and to advise. It is now up to the legislature, which I'm part of, and the governor to implement. But you guys have to stay engaged. You have to be a prosecutor in those areas. You have to support Dr. Weber 2.0, who's a member of the Legislative Black Caucus. You have to support Reggie Jones Sawyer as we move a comprehensive bill package forward to implement what's in this report. So that's critically important. Over the last 2 years, this task force has documented in great detail the history of slavery, not only in this nation, but in California, and the patterns of systemic racism and injustice that continue long after slavery ended. We've documented the racially motivated taking of Black land, as we've heard from the 3 families here, of Bruce's Beach here in Southern California, which I was honored to legislate and pass legislation to return that property. And we know about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Inkwell, and so many other places all across this nation where land was stolen. The over-policing, the over-incarceration of African Americans, the denial of home ownership through practices like redlining, restrictive covenants, and now R1s, R2s, and R3s. People don't understand. In 1948, Thurgood Marshall and Warren Miller, 2 Black attorneys, went to the Supreme Court and overturned restrictive covenants. 2 years later, cities started implementing R1s, R2s. That's an extension of racism, whether we want to believe it or not.
That's right.
So we need to know that history as well. And the harm still exists today because there's plenty of African Americans who have never owned homes in this state or in this country. When slavery ended in 1863, there was a promise made to those slaves of 40 acres and a mule.
Never got it.
A promise of land that was never paid. People often say, why California? California was a free state, but in name only, not in practice, not in practice, not in deeds. As Reverend Brown stated, the first governor of this state owned slaves and was proud of it. If you were brought here as a slave, you were treated as a slave. If you gave birth here as a slave, that child was born a slave. If you were a runaway, we had a fugitive slave law that returned you back to the state and the plantation that you escaped from. People will say, I didn't own slaves, so why should I have to pay? And I often say, if you can inherit generational wealth, you can inherit generational debt. Generational wealth in this country has been derived through slavery or the access to free labor over the years. But Dr. Weber stated it far more eloquently and more plain for all of us to understand. And she said, you may not have planted the tree, but you surely enjoy the shade. Reparations is truly and simply a debt owed to those descendants of chattel slavery.
Yes.
Reparations is not a gift. It's not a handout. It is not charity. It is what was promised, what was owed, and what is long overdue. I had the privilege of serving across the street in the legislature for over 12 years, and I've lost count of the number of bills that we dealt with regarding wage theft. Well, slavery was 250 years of wage theft. 90 years of Jim Crow wage thefts. And this has been, like I say, 250 years where slaves were denied an income. And the harm of wage theft still exists today. Yes. This task force makes numerous worthy and important recommendations of what reparations could include. It could include cash payments. It can include free tuition to our UCs and CSUs. It can be a first-time home buyer assistance down payment, interest-free loans, state tax relief, free health care, on and on and on. We can do that. Many people say, what's the cost of reparations? Let's be clear and honest. The cost of reparations will be high. But make no mistake, the harms that are done are just as high. And the harms and the disparities it created continues to this day. Now that the final report is completed, our recommendations must be considered by the legislature, as I stated. As a member of the California State Senate, it will be up to me and my colleagues to begin the hard work of turning this into policy that we can implement and making it a reality, not just an aspirational hope, but a reality. People say, how can we pay for this? We just passed a $300 billion budget in California. If we just put 0.5% of our budget into annuity annually, that's $1.5 billion a year we can pay for it.
All right.
No one asked how we pay for high-speed rail that many in the legislature call the train to nowhere that is now beyond $100 billion. We find money to do that. So, this is our priority. We often say our budget is a reflection of our values and our priorities. If this is true, then reparations needs to be in our budget.
Yes.
It has to be in our budget. And if it's not, then it's just words on paper. It won't be easy, because I'm not going to mislead any of you guys here. It will not be easy. I'm not under any illusion And I urge everyone, again, to understand that this is going to be a start of another lengthy process. We won't do it in one legislative cycle. We won't do it in one bill. But we need, again, all of you to stay engaged, to let your voices be heard, let you be seen. I encourage all Californians and every one of my colleagues in the legislature to not just receive this report, but to read it. But to read it. Because as Reverend Brown states, this is the truth. Everyone must be educated, and we must educate ourselves on California history as well as American history. Reparations has been painstakingly documented in California and the role of slavery and the decades of systemic discrimination that followed. It is often said that there are stories that made America, and then there's stories that America has made up. Much of what we teach is the stories that America has made up. This is the story that made America. This is the story that made America. We must educate ourselves on the real history and not the whitewashed version that they want to teach and continue to teach. The task force report is documented with citations and footnotes. People can choose to ignore it. They can be uncomfortable with the history, but you cannot deny the truth. Now's the time to face it, folks. To own up to the debt that is owed. To right the historic wrongs here in California and across this nation. To restore and repair the damages that has been done. And we can do this. We can do this if we're committed to it. It was done for our Jewish brothers and sisters when we helped them after the Holocaust in Germany, not on American soil. As Attorney Tamaki did so great, effectively 30 years ago in recognizing the harms to our Japanese brothers and sisters who were interned during World War II. We made reparations to them. We made them whole. And now our Native American indigenous people, they're benefiting from reparations to what we call now gaming. Gaming. That is their reparation. And so when we do this, California will be an example for not only other states, but this nation as a whole of what can be done and what should be done. We can be that North Star to guide the rest of this nation. I'm ready to take on the next step. I'm ready to start that debate. I'm ready to fight the good fight, as John Lewis stated, to pay the debt that is owed and to repair the damages that have been done to the state and to this nation and to the people of chattel slavery. Thank you, Madam
We're with you all the way. We're with Steve. We're with Steve. We're with Steve. We're with Steve. We're going to help you fight it all the way.
Thank you, Senator Bradford, for this powerful reflection. I'll now turn to Attorney Tamaki for his reflection.
I'd like to defer to my other task force members. So Professor Lewis or Professor Grills or Lisa, I'm serious.
No, Don, we reject that. Please, Don. We got you.
Well, I have the misfortune of following the orators. And we've not heard from Professor Grills or Lisa Holder or Professor Lewis, but these are hard acts to follow. So, that's my situation. And let's face it, I stick out like a sore thumb. And the group task force.
We love you.
We got you. We got you. We got you.
I'm just going to say the group task force picture. I look like the little Asian guy that's photobombing. And so I want to thank the task force members. I want to thank Chair Moore. She's changed my wife's dinner table conversation with me when I want to speak. I have to raise my hand. She says, "Member Tamaki, you are recognized." So you brought order to our home. Thank you, Chairman. So seriously, my remarks are a parade of thank yous and statements of gratitude. First, Secretary Shirley Weber, who had the vision. And in as much as it's never been done before in the entire history of the country to this degree, in as much as federal legislation has stalled for almost 40 years, where Congress has not shown the will to even study reparations, let alone do anything about it. This work is groundbreaking, and so I'm grateful. I want to thank the advocacy organizations here and elsewhere that are both determined, competent, and racially diverse in terms of allies. I want to thank Attorney General Bonta for deploying the resources to support the attorneys and staff to do this work. Let me talk a little bit about allyship, and so much of this is personal to me. My parents, by order of the military, were among those groups of Bay Area, 8,000 of them actually, that were forced out of their homes at gunpoint and sent into Tanforan Racetrack. It's a racetrack in San Bruno. It's now a shopping center, but then it was surrounded by barbed wire and machine gun towers. And they went from their homes to living literally in a horse stall while 10 concentration camps were being built from California to Arkansas. One of the things they didn't miss was the irony that the racetracks, restrooms, and drinking fountains were segregated and marked by signs reading white and color. And why is that significant? To them, it meant that what started out as anti-Black hatred and bias, and Jim Crow entering the state from its very beginnings, simply found a new target, at least for this period of time. And at that time, Japanese Americans in the racial hierarchy suddenly found themselves in the crosshairs, and they never forgot that. We also don't forget the fact that African American people opened the door, and everybody else walked through it.
That's hard.
It's a matter of simple justice, as a matter of morality, but also as a matter of reciprocity.
Right.
Organizations, groups, individuals, populations, we need to get into this fight. And it must be led by African American leadership. And I'm privileged to be on this task force with such competent, formidable, excellent, leadership. And I look forward to continuing that fight. But all of us, the rest of us, have to get involved in this to support this, realizing that fundamentally this is an American issue. It's about an original sin that was never addressed. And so it goes to the core of who we think we are as Americans. Professor Grills mentioned it this morning during the press conference. It goes to the meaning of democracy that we're being challenged with at this very moment. And so it goes to changing culture that produced the systems that in turn produce the outcomes that we're seeing today. As a reflection of that endorsement, let me give you an example. About 7 months ago, the Japanese American Bar Association in Los Angeles and the John M. Langston Bar Association in Los Angeles connected in a showing of allyship to start an endorsement campaign, endorsing the concept of reparations, that it is time for the legislature to seriously consider it and to implement it. We started with maybe 20 or 30 organizations today I can tell you that is 306 organizations. And it's also spread into the mainstream. You know, you'd expect the civil rights groups, the social services groups, big and small, to be there, and they are. But the faith community has signed up for this. The California Wellness Foundation, the Weingart Foundation, these are $2 billion philanthropies that are saying it's time. The Bar Associations of Los Angeles, one of the biggest bars in the country, San Francisco, Alameda, Sacramento has joined this effort. We have 306 now. I'm sure that'll be double in the next few months, and shortly we hope to grow that into the thousands. Critics might be dismissive of an endorsement campaign, but bear in mind, this hasn't happened before. This is the first time where this conversation is really entering the mainstream in a way that people feel comfortable enough to endorse it. So I think we have the beginnings of the social movement of changing the needle of public opinion in order to give the legislature the political will to actually get this done. But as other speakers have mentioned, the fight really is now. The real work has to begin. I want to next, we've been thanked a lot. I appreciate it personally, but I want to also lift up those, individuals within the Department of Justice that produced this work. And we reviewed it, we helped to edit it, but the amount of research and the amount of writing that went into this is breathtaking. The quality of this work, this quality only gets done when people believe in the mission. And if folks were just kind of doing it as part of their job and going through the motions, it would be reflected in the work. But when people believe in the mission, their heart and soul, they commit to it. It's the reason why they joined the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. It is reflected in the work. I can't tell you how many times on the weekends, weeknights at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., I'm getting emails about edits and things that are being suggested, research that has to be done, and filling all the holes. So I'm going to tag team with Professor Grills on this to show some appreciation and some love to the people that really produced this work that we now stand on. And let me say this, it's going to resonate nationally, and the ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
Yes!
Following the footsteps of Pastor Brown here, I think, as Lisa Holder said, this is the book of truth, and every social movement requires the scholarly and intellectual underpinnings, and this is it. And I thought I knew something about American history, felt I was pretty well read, and after working on the report, the interim report, I realized my understanding is not even close.
Right.
I did not understand the decade after decade after decade, one thing after another, as the bias and the hate morphed from one version to another. And what this report has done is connect the dots. And as Zion Yang has said, who supervised the writing team, I mean, if you went to hundreds of different sources, you could find this material. But there's value in it all being assembled and synthesized in one place. Yeah. And then the dots are connected to show how our past has created today's outcomes. And so, we thank you for that. And I want to just lift up some names here. Michael Newman has done a masterful job guiding the process. I appreciate that. David Brown, outstanding. Thank you so much. I'll call out Sarah Belton. She no longer is with the Department of Justice. But my understanding is that she looked at the amount originally proposed without when it wasn't given much thought as to how the task force and what the resources the task force would need, and responsible for building this team out that, is a couple dozen lawyers, involves Department of Justice PhDs, and many people, including legislative staff like Nick Fletcher and others, who were pulled into this process of reviewing and producing this work. And the other thing I think is she deserves credit for structuring, having the vision to structure the sequencing of each chapter, which begins with enslavement, goes into racial terror, then goes into political disenfranchisement, and you can see the historical trend line, and then into housing, segregation in education and in healthcare, and everything else. And that took, that kind of vision, we're now reaping the benefits of. Ziyin Yang is here. She supervised the writing team on the interim report. And you imagine the difficulty of taking everybody's writing and synthesizing it into a coherent, non-redundant piece of work, and making it seamless, like it's written by one person as opposed to dozens. So that is an enormous amount of work. And let me call out the other names here too: Christine Chuang, Robin Goldfaden, Tony Sefarius, Francisco Valderrama, Dr. Tiffany Jans Desarmeaux, Jesse Bussbaum, Kelly Burns, Lisa Ehrlich, Danielle Elliott, Laura Fair, Vince Gazawi, Jennifer Gibson, Newton Knowles. You could see how many people worked on this. Tanya Koshi, Edward Nugent, Sri Panchalam, Dong Shin, Dalen Viveris, Deborah Chen, Mina Visvanathan. And here, I want to lift up the team that really made these hearings possible, and all the communications and fielding of the comments for the public, and there's tons of work that happened in the background. So Katarina New, Noel Garcia, Alicia Turner, Shanice Flowers, Trini Mercado, Oscar Estrella, Aisha Martin Walton, Dorothea Johnson. So I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl because I know she wants to say some comments on this thing.
Thank you, Don. You actually said much of what I was going to say. But specific to the DOJ and recognizing how instrumental, how central, how essential they were to the work of this task force, I'm reminded of the song, "We Who Believe in Freedom Cannot Rest." DOJ did not rest. For the last 2 years, they have worked tirelessly. And as Dawn said, it was because it wasn't just a job. They had skin in the game. And like a young man said in a meeting that I led yesterday, he said, people like our rhythm, they want no parts of our blues. DOJ rolled up its sleeves and said, we're in it, and we're going to walk through the blues with you. And so I think that because of what they did, their commitment, their excellence, that they deserve a standing ovation.
Sure, Member Grills, we'll turn to you for your final reflections.
Thank you. So, I'm a psychologist. So I'm going to share my comments through the lens of a psychologist, a clinical psychologist nonetheless, who understands how critical it is to appreciate human behavior and the human spirit. So in saying that, first of all, I want to say that being on this task force has been an honor. It has been an honor to serve alongside my colleagues here up on this dais. It has been an honor to serve with the DOJ team. And it has been an honor to do what I can to respect the memory of my grandfather. My granddaddy, I called him granddaddy, he was a sharecropper who worked his way out of that condition to create his own businesses in Manning, South Carolina, and to put his 3 daughters of his 6 children all through college. It broke my heart when I was trying to do my own lineage search to see granddaddy, someone who is a giant in my eyes, listed as a bag boy. I'm here this day to say, you are not a bag boy. You will not be disrespected that way. Granddaddy, you are a proud, industrious, principled Black man, father, grandfather, and stoic, who in the middle of the night would go and cut down or remove Black bodies hanging from trees. That was what my grandfather did. Strange fruit, for sure. I pray that he and all of our ancestors in this room are looking upon us today and saying, job well done. So this has been, for me, the work on this task force, it's been a labor of love, marked by the highest of highs, those highs including witnessing the brilliance of our experts, our scholars, our lawyers, who have come and given testimony that contributed to this encyclopedia of truth. But it was also a time where it's a labor of love with the lowest of lows. And some of those lows were actually witnessing the pain, the anguish, the unresolved trauma experienced by our people. As Dr. Brian Smedley said, he said the most enduring effect of the thing called slave was to dehumanize more than 30% of the human population while holding harmless the perpetrators of this crime against humanity. And I saw the consequences of not holding the perpetrators accountable. And so when I look at the lowest of lows, I'm reminded of something that truly broke my heart when I was sitting on a panel at Harvard University with talking on the topic of reparations to Harvard's School of Public Policy. And she described a young brother, a gang member in Boston, who had tattooed on his arm, "Born to be hated, dying to be loved." We should be alarmed and heartbroken that a child has tattooed that on his arm. That is not acceptable, and the entire country should mobilize into making sure that no child has to go through life carrying that burden. I ask myself, where is America's sense of humanity? This is no minor question. As a society, we should be concerned with the extent to which we have lost compassion, empathy, and a sense of respect for other human beings. We have to understand that at the end of the day, for those of us of African ancestry, no matter what the legislature does, no matter what the federal government does or the president, at the end of the day, no matter what happens, our final report sets the record straight. And no matter the outcome, as Simbeni says, if the rest of the world does not see us, we see ourselves. We know the truth, and we will not be blinded. As human beings, Black folk, have a need for belonging, for agency and respect. To have this denied us since our forced arrival into this country is not a minor thing psychologically. We bleed. We hurt. We will die if you don't give us air and water. We are human beings. And we have to understand the anguish, the multi-generational prolonged suffering this country has meted upon us. We have to remember the anguish contained in Doc Rivers' comment in 2020 when he said, "We keep loving this country and this country doesn't love us back." As human beings, that hurts. And we have to recognize that that hurt needs to be resolved. It needs to be addressed. And so what I want to conclude with is America. You know that movie that said, "I know what you did last night"? We can now say, America, we know what you did. And we know what you continue to do. We see you. The question is, America, do you see yourself? So, to California and America, I conclude with the following words that I beg you to reflect on. Media, I beg you, go deeper. Go deeper, all right? So those words are, Baldwin said, "You cannot lynch me and keep me in ghettos without becoming something monstrous yourself." We have to understand that reparations is not, again, as I believe Member Tamaki and others have said, it's not just about Black people. This is a fight for the heart and the soul and the integrity and the authenticity of American society. And Baldwin went one step further, because, he was deep like that. He said, "The future of the country depends on white people being able to ask and answer the question of themselves why they created the NIGGER. Struggle with that question. Why did I need to create it? How have I been manipulated in this racialized society? And how have I been impacted emotionally, psychologically, and in terms of my own sense of humanity as a person that is part of a society to which we all have a responsibility to one another?" So if we want to see transformative change, if we want to see our democracy make it into the future, we got to grapple with the elephant in the room, which is racism. Past, present, and needs to be stopped going into the future. And so, to all of you who have come today and have been coming over the last 2 years, I say the real work begins now. And it's not just up to our legislators. Community, it's your turn at bat. And we need you at bat to monitor, to inform, and to impress upon our legislature, our neighbors, our larger community, our folks at work, that the work of retribution, the work of reparations is the work of American society, and any diminishment of recommendations for repair will not be accepted. Period. Full stop.
Thank you, Member Grills, for those powerful final reflections. I'll now turn to Member Holder for her reflection.
Thank you, Chair Moore. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will.
Say so.
So said the great Frederick Douglass. The reparations process allows us to speak truth to power. The reparations process also teaches truth to dismantle oppressive legacies of power. The task force report catalogs the full scope and depth of injustice visited upon African Americans in California. In doing so, it does not divide us. To the contrary, it unites us by creating a space for us to come together around an honest narrative and a historical record with some integrity. The report creates an opportunity for a long overdue, candid discussion about race in America. We are not post-racial. It allows us to have a candid discussion about the anti-Black animus that permeates every aspect of American life. The overwhelming evidence in this report compels us to acknowledge that we exist within a caste system. Right. Yes. And it's a caste system that perpetuates badges of slavery with devastating effects on contemporary Black communities. The report recommendations provide us the tools to reconcile this truth, to course correct, to repair the harm, and to finally begin to heal. As you read this report and grapple with the horrifying statistics that establish that ongoing systemic anti-Black oppression is real, you may at times feel a sense of despair. Indeed, the report shines a spotlight on the darkest hours and most obscure chapters of our collective past and present. But as the saying goes, never are we nearest to the light than when darkness is deepest. As a task force, we have endeavored to create a clear roadmap for undertaking a third reconstruction, where we transform our systems so that they finally serve the most marginalized descendant communities and cover the debt owed. And make no mistake, from the last two Reconstruction efforts in the 1870s and the 1970s, which were upended by right-wing reactionaries and racial terror, we learned that the fixes must be adaptive, iterative, and far-sighted to overcome the constant headwinds of systemic white supremacy. And for those reactionaries who say slavery is old news and the time for reparations has passed, well, you know what? I've been a civil rights lawyer for 20 years. And I say, show me the statute of limitations on mass genocide. Show me the statute of limitations on the world's greatest crime against humanity. And show me the statute of limitations on accountability for original sin. It has been my great honor to serve on this task force and to do the profound work to uplift this book of truth. 1,100 pages of pure, unvarnished truth. And this book Book of Truth will be the catalyst to unite and reconcile our communities. It will not divide us. And I'd like to thank the people who made it all possible. Madam Secretary Weber, you are an inspiration. I thank the governor. I thank our tireless and dauntless DOJ partners, our intrepid and fierce economists who provided us with creative solutions for reconciling the debt owed, and a special thanks posthumously to Dr. Spriggs. I want to thank the 100+ scholars who came in here to testify, the experts, the Bunch Center researchers who illuminated the path of knowledge about the broad and continuing impact of slavery, segregation, and post-civil rights apartheid on our state apparatus. And finally, I thank the activists that pushed AB 3121 forward and stayed engaged throughout the past 2 years of healing. And the scores of people who participated in public comment and listening sessions and allowed themselves to be vulnerable, shared with us their pain and their fury and their truth, and afforded the human emotions that actually breathed life into this process and fueled the work. And speaking of work, we have only just begun the work. From here on out, it's going to take tremendous effort from all of our communities across race lines. And remember, part of the work here is to stay alert, stay focused, stay on task, to resist disinformation. That is the enemy. Resist imbalanced media messaging. And resist the status quo's racialized tropes that always seek and unfortunately manage to divide us. We need to mobilize and organize and build the political will required to compel our elected representatives to vote for a reparations bill. I'll close by quoting the great songwriter and truth-telling bard, Bob Marley. All that glitters is not gold. Half the story has never been told. But now that you see the light, stand up for your rights. Get up and stand up for Black reparations. Stand up! Stand up! Stand up!
Reparations now! Hallelujah.
Thank you, Member Holder, for those amazing, powerful, astounding final reflections. Shout out to Robert Nesta Marley as well. Also to the senior member, John Sawyer,
Thank you, Madam Chair. About recently, a white reporter was asking me about my experiences here. And they went on and on and on about you and how you came to each of these meetings. And the way she described it, she said, how can you take them yelling at you every day?
That's all they want.
I still don't think you really understand what was really going on.
Tell the truth. Tell the truth. You missed it.
What I heard and what you heard are two different things.
Say it.
And I don't think you really understood what was going through you when you came here and you testified. Because what I heard was 400 years of Black oppression, 400 years of people not being able to testify. You were testifying for every African American, every African that was enslaved on those ships and brought here. Every time one of you came to the mic and you almost had tears in your eyes, some of you had tears in your eyes, that was from the slaves that were on those plantations that had whelps on their back, that were treated like animals, 3/4 a human being, that were treated as subhuman. But guess what? They couldn't speak out. And if they did, what happened to them? They were killed. And if you ran away, they would come get you and bring you back. If you look at the early slave catchers and their badges, they look a lot like sheriff badges. If you look at the system the way it is done to keep us down and to make sure we never can get back up again. But we've gone beyond that. Think about how resilient we are. Look at yourselves here. You spoke for your ancestors, and you should give each one of you a round of applause. My grandfather came to California because my uncle dared to integrate an all-white school. And after he was out, the Klan decided they were going to lynch him. What they didn't know is his Black Masonic brothers overheard that because they were obviously maids. They were working as butlers, chauffeurs in those homes. They then put a wig on him, put a dress on him, and brought him here to California on Woodland Place because they wanted to save him for what he did. Being able to stand up, think about it, to be able to stand up in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957, where every white person wanted to kill you because your son was trying to get an education, trying to go to high school. I didn't say college, because that's what they're trying to stop us from going today. De facto segregation is happening right now in the Supreme Court. And so my reflection is, not only am I honored to be here, I genuinely believe in a lot of ways God has destined each of us to be here. These are some of the brightest people I've ever met in my life. These are the best, most well-spoken people I've ever met in my life. I think I'm the dumbest person on this panel. I'm humbled every time we get together and we discuss this document. I had no idea we could put something like this together. Hopefully you all get, I'm going to say electronic copy because this bad boy costs a lot of money. But you all need to get a copy whether it's electronic or whatever, you need to get a copy. But most important, we need to get everyone to read it. Because once you read it, from what I've learned on this committee, is once you read it and you still have a problem with affirmative action, you still have a problem with quotas, which quotas really was about showing where we are oppressed. That's why they had to get rid of quotas, because they didn't want to show their racism. Because sometimes the hood comes down, and we want the hood to come up so you see who you are. And they don't want to be allowed. Some of them don't want to be seen. So this is why it's so important for reparations. I don't know, as we move forward, Mr. Bradford and I have the honor of trying to shepherd this through.
We're with you, Reggie!
But I also want to, and I'm not sure, I was out for a while, but my colleagues in the California Legislative Black Caucus are here. They are so important. I would love for them to stand up. We have Assemblymember Tina McKinnon, Assemblymember Dr. Weber, Dr. Akila Weber, Mia Bonta, Mr. Bryant, and Mr. Jackson. The reason I wanted them to stand up, the reason I want you to see them, because as we go into battle, these are the people you want to be in the foxhole with. These are the people that are going to fight with us to make sure we get this done. Because as we said, we can't do this alone. And we all are going to, there's 12 of us, but we all will need you to be here. That's why they're here today, to show that they have our backs and they have your back to make sure this gets done. So this is another journey that we're all going to share. It is a difficult one. Dr. Weber, in her brilliance of how she mapped this out, her strategic plan, is probably one of the best I've seen. Last year we proved it. This year we're showing the recommendations. And next year we're going to move with legislative and budget ideas to make it happen. And we can't forget there's one more. Because as I've said to everyone in this room, probably 1,000 times, it's never legislation, it's always implementation. So this is a long journey. Dr. Martin Luther King, when he decided he was going to get us the right to vote and civil rights, it didn't happen overnight. It was a long journey. And even then, after we got it, they took it away from us. That's why you have to stay vigilant. And that's why we're going to need you here each and every day. And again, I want to commend DOJ. I want to commend my partners in this, because at the end of the day, we couldn't have done this without them, and we couldn't have done it without you. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Jones Sawyer, for those powerful final reflections. Last but not least, we'll turn to Member Scott Lewis for his final reflection. But first, I just want to make an announcement, breaking news. Our final report is live on our website for your to download. So go to oag.ca.gov/AB3121/report to see the final report. Now we'll turn to Member Scott Lewis for his final reflections.
Thank you, Chair Moore. I really didn't want to go last. And I was like, no, Reggie, please. So I'm going to make a couple of very brief comments, because there is work to do and I want us to get to it. First, I really am humbled to have been invited to take part in this process, and to meet and to know and to learn from every one of you has been truly the blessing of a lifetime. The community has been inspiring, has been remarkable, and you really truly are the blessings of your ancestors. I want to quickly say that I want to make a very dispassionate statement that quickly goes back to the Emancipation Proclamation. So in that document, which we all, I think, agree is important, we should, well, you know, in proclaiming the emancipation of enslaved people, enslaved African Americans in this country, Lincoln said two things: that the government should recognize and maintain the freedom of such persons, and that the government should do no acts to repress such persons in any efforts they may make for their actual freedom. I want to repeat that last part. That the government will do no acts or acts to repress such persons in any efforts they make for their actual freedom. Members John Sawyer, member Montgomery Stepp just gave direct testimony of how their families, right, were repressed in their efforts to make their actual freedom. The document here, it's really heavy, by the way. Is it? I don't have boundaries. I want to, like, you know, like, sure, but, you know, I kind of want to keep it too, you know. But this document is a testimony to the ways repeatedly that the state of California has engaged in repressing African Americans in their attempts to actually make their freedom. This is what this is. And I want to add to that, that we should be mindful of the fact that in that act of repressing has been an intentional taking advantage and productivity for the benefit of the state. Meaning every instance of dispossession has been an opportunity for development for the state. Those of you know I'm from Berkeley, and I tell the story of South Berkeley all the time where I live, right? That in South Berkeley was the commercial heart of the African American community in that city. And in the 1970s, in 1973, I believe specifically, the commercial corridor was raised to build the BART station at Ashby BART. So what that means is that the everyday commuting of workers to the city and around the Bay Area, whether you're working at Twitter or Facebook or Google, is directly inherited of the dispossession of that community. And so I want us to remember that this is the dualistic relationship that Black harm has had in this country. Meaning, it's one thing to say, yes, there's been anti-Blackness, it has been harmful to the Black community, but I want us to always keep at the front of our mind how productive that harm has been. It isn't just about Black loss, it is about state gain. And I'm not going to call it white gain, state gain. And so with that being said, reparations are due for the most simple, boring reason. Because you've benefited.
That's right. And still benefiting.
And still benefiting. So from convict leasing to gentrification, you have policies after policy, and we must remember slavery was a policy. Continue to enact harms of dispossession for African Americans who again were incorporated into this country for free labor to give without being compensated. With emancipation, there has only come new ways to take without due compensation. And the problem with that is that despite all of that, African Americans in this state and in this country have done and work to fulfill the promise of Reconstruction, which is to gain tools, to gain property, and to just do the work of liberating themselves. And at every single turn, the state has engaged in policies and programs to interrupt that progress. And so reparations aren't needed for African Americans to progress. Reparations are needed to compensate African Americans for the repeated disruption to their progress. And then I want to say one more thing, which is that if this is reparations, let's make no mistake that this cannot guarantee repair. Reparations are the compensation for the injuries of African Americans today and their ancestors. But repair is the work of self-determination. Repair is the work of taking what was promised in Reconstruction, which was tools, right, and labor, your own labor, and land, and to go about the work of deciding who you want to be. And so as much as we want to uplift and we need to uplift our ancestors, I want us to think about our generations to come. In one of my books, I dedicate both of my books to my child. I love my child. And this in Jamaica is my one picnic. So, but in that dedication, I say, Therese, may you never feel the need for repair. And that's what I want for all of our children. Amen. Yeah. And so I think this is an important, critical first step. And I wanted to say give thanks to everybody who has made this possible, who have invited me into your community to do this work, and for, my beloved colleagues here who are now friends, you know what I mean? Like, for real. Like, I'm into the WhatsApp if you can. So many people have been thanked, and I want to just reiterate those thanks, and I just want to say thank you, right, to the community, because this is your work. I've only been doing this in this way for the past 2 years, but this has been an ongoing labor for you in your more quieter spaces, oftentimes relegated spaces. And so I just want to say thank you for your ongoing labors, and I want to just give you as much of myself as I can give. Apparently not this thing. I'm going to keep mine. But beyond that, I will forever, be here to work with you on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Scott Lewis, for those amazing final reflections. I'll now turn to one of our esteemed economists that we've worked alongside with for over 1.5 years, Professor Kesia Campbell, to speak to their work and then also to give some remarks on the passing of Dr. William Spriggs.
Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to thank the task force for allowing me to take this platform to, firstly, from a very personal level, kind of reflect on the work that I've done here as an economist. Never in my lifetime I thought sitting in classes and working out equations and graphs that I would ever be a part of something so groundbreaking, so transformational. This that has happened here with the task force has transformed me as a human being, has opened my eyes even more so to understanding what exactly it means to be a Black American, figuring out what that journey entails. And I'll probably never, ever work on anything like this so transformational. I am humbled. I really appreciate the acceptance from the community, from the body here. I came and listened to the stories and understood and felt pain. And as we the expert group sat and figured out what exactly that meant in terms of using our skills for quantification, we kind of reflected on those particular stories. And what we see here as an output is a testament to what this community really has to say and what they have endured. Again, I'm humbled. The expert group that I worked with, Kirsten Mullin, William Sandy Darity, Thomas Kramer, and Bill Spriggs. We worked as a group, and from that particular group, what we went through and figured out is something, as I said, has been transformational. From that reflection, I wanted to say a few words about Bill Spriggs, who passed away and was a part of the expert group. It is with a heavy heart and profound sadness that we are here remembering and reflecting on the work of Bill Spriggs, a brilliant economist and esteemed member of the econ community, and was a part of the expert group that worked with this task force. Dr. Spriggs departed from this world, leaving behind a legacy of intellectual prowess and a deep commitment to advancing economic knowledge. Dr. Spriggs' career spanned decades, during which he played an instrumental role in shaping economic theory and policy. His groundbreaking research explored the intricate interplay between market forces, government interventions, and socioeconomic development. His work touched on a wide range of topics, from income inequality and poverty alleviation to international trade and monetary policy. Bill Spriggs has been actively involved in research and publishing throughout his career. His work often focused on labor market dynamics, unemployment, income inequality, and of course, a big thing and a big part of his research was understanding racial disparities in economic outcomes. He has authored and co-authored numerous academic papers, articles, reports, and he has presented his findings and insights to academic and policy audiences, both here in the United States and internationally. As a public intellectual, Bill Spriggs is known for advocating for policies that address economic inequality and promote social justice. This is the influence he had as a part of this expert group that we worked with. He has been very vocal about the need to tackle racial and ethnic disparities in employment, wages, and economic opportunities. Spriggs frequently provides expert commentary and analysis on economic issues on various media outlets. Beyond his academic achievement, Dr. Spriggs was a dedicated teacher and mentor. In the time that I worked with him, I was in awe of what he has accomplished and what he had to say. As a professor at several renowned institutions, he inspired countless students to engage critically with economic concepts, and he fostered their intellectual growth.